Good morning, everybody. Wow. Did I call it? Did I call it or did I call it? They're saying that the verdict has just come in and it was read. I set this thing up for 10:30. I did that 4 hours ago. I set this thing up for 10:30. And sure enough, it seems we have a verdict. At least is being reported on X right now. Oh my God. Oh my God. The verdict is in. At least according, if you trust this guy. This is the first place I saw it. Oh my God. First person I'm embarrassed to admit that this is the first thing that popped up. I have to admit where it popped up. I'm gonna be checking around to get reactions from folks. Breaking: Sean Combs found guilty on 2 of 5 counts, both for transportation to engage in prostitution. Oh my God. So glad I didn't call. So glad. So glad. Oh my God. Oh, so glad I didn't make. This is why you don't predict the jury. This is why I said as this case was going on. Let's see if we get. I'm going to see if I get more reports for you guys. Wow. Sean Combs found guilty on 2 of 5 counts. Oh my God. Both for transportation to engage in prostitution. He's going to walk out of there. Those each carry a maximum of 10 years, and those were the gimmies. This is an utter outright failure for the government and serves them the heck right. Well, I'm going to tell you, this guy's a freaking monster. He's a terrible human being. He is. I shouldn't say that. He's about to be a free man. They say that he could get out for time served. Wow. Let's see what he's got. Let's see what Diddy.
They didn't get Diddy for RICO, but R. Kelly got RICO. So, it seems like I think Diddy's defense team did a better job in fighting the RICO charges.
In the park across the street doing their morning workout, but everyone is
Chicago,
curious
in Illinois,
whether Sean Combs is going to walk out those golden doors,
Yeah.
released on bail. His defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo,
Good
told
chance.
the judge a moment ago Combs would be willing to put up $1 million bail.
He's going to get out.
That
He's going to get out. Of course, he's
before his sentencing.
Federal
prosecutors just opposed his release on bail.
No, he should get bail.
He has committed a litany of crimes, and there's no reason to believe he would do anything different.
He is
released
now. He hasn't proven it.
You got to let him out.
Litany of crimes. He was just found not guilty.
And a risk of flight.
You let him out.
Justice.
You've
they
lost.
Point to the physical violence, even though he was not found
guilty of any of that. He's not guilty
nor
of any
charged with any physical violence.
Yeah.
They say he has shown a predilection.
No,
physical violence,
that's ridiculous.
Readily admitted. So prosecutors are opposing his release on bail.
That's
the judge
ridiculous.
is going to take a moment to decide.
It's ridiculous.
Brian, your thoughts? Is Sean Combs a risk?
No, he's not a risk.
Oh, of course he's a risk.
You gotta let him.
So
he's just found not guilty.
Right? Would I want Sean Combs to be
Brian,
around
I saw
any
Brian.
girlfriends or women right now? No. Because I think the allegations and the facts have shown that he is a toxic individual who could be very violent towards women. But if you're asking me as to whether
I saw Brian every day
to not come back to court to be sentenced,
he's not a risk.
Maybe it's my bias as a defense attorney and looking at this verdict now, I do not believe he's a risk to not come back to court. I think if anything,
I saw Brian every day.
He is happy.
I'm sure he's elated
to come back to court.
I am sure he's elated.
The best argument for sentencing, and yes, he might spend some years in prison, but the amount of time that he would spend,
I am sure he is elated.
He fled and never came back, and he has children here. He has enterprises here. He has at least 60 civil lawsuits that he has to fight. He has, in my mind, and maybe I'm making too strong of an application as a defense attorney, he has far more reasons to stay here and fight now.
Than he did.
Than to fully never come back.
It would be stupid.
Do I think he's going to get released?
He should get released.
Probably not.
I think he should.
Of course, he's going to get released.
And I don't think the judge will allow that.
But the judge, to be honest with you, I am no P. Diddy fan. well, I'm a fan of the music. I'm not a fan of the guy and all this stuff. He should get released. Even though people know he's a predator, he's this, he's that.
He's a monster. He's a
seen.
terrible human being.
No violence. It's a couple of Mann Act violations. Should he spend the rest of the time in jail before sentencing? Give him the $1 million bond. Let him get his behind out and call it a day. So I would send his ass home. Put the $1 million. I'm
gonna ask Nate if he wants to cross over.
Is he not coming back to be sentenced?
I'll probably say yes.
On these light charges? Of course he is. Yeah, he's probably want to do it now. Sentence me now.
Yeah.
Even if he goes to jail, he's good. So
yeah. He can literally get out in time served.
Alex strongly disagrees with me. So, and this person is free R. Kelly.
He can totally get out. He can totally. Now, the longer this case went on, the more public sentiment was against the government. The more free Diddy, the louder free Diddy became.
The legal principles here. The bail is supposed to be just to guarantee you coming back to jail. Is he a flight risk? Absolutely not. What's he gonna? If he runs, he gets more time than if he goes to sentencing.
Yeah,
he's not a flight risk. Everybody knows who he is. Yeah, just send him on his way. Yeah, no violence that he was charged with. That's the difference. So yeah, I just don't. I think it's over.
But I think there is a very valid and strong argument that
he is. How much time? Somebody asked how much time is Diddy looking at? He's looking at between
maximum 10 years each.
I would say,
but they'll
under 5 years.
Yeah,
some judge may give him a 2-year sentence or something like that. But if I'm doing a judge, he's a first-time offender. He's been convicted of 2 low-level felonies. Let's just be honest. Up to 10 years, these are 2 low-level felonies. I could see.
I think it's hilarious.
Maybe a month or 2 in jail. I could see probation. I could see there's a lot of possibilities here.
20 months K-Val
time. And even though these are 2 counts, let's just be honest, people. These are pretty much BS counts, right? These were just in case we don't get them on anything, we get them on something. So I think right now, if he gets, if people are looking at him getting 10, he's not getting 10 years for this. He's probably going to be getting, if he gets more than 3 years, I'd be shocked. That'll shock me. I'm like, my God, they threw the book at him for this bullshit. But I think right now we're honestly looking at possibly less than a year.
Yeah,
less than a year. But again, that's just my prediction. But yeah, he's not getting more than 5 years for this stuff. If he does, that would be shocking. I think the underage girls part is a huge difference between Diddy and Kells. But maybe I'm missing something. That may be true too.
I think this is hilarious
because he was done with
I was so angry at the government for the way they did this trial. Everything about these charges was ridiculous
a lot of people
stupid.
Saying, it's about RICO. It's about RICO. It's about RICO. And
it wasn't about RICO.
Saying, like, it's
that
about
was
RICO,
stupid. Also,
RICO. And they never used RICO for this. They have used RICO for this before.
That was stupid.
And you saw it used many times before. So it's them using RICO wasn't the real strange part about this. It's that the defense was able to make the argument to not only the jurors but the public that there's really no RICO here. That's I think the difference. So,
yeah.
But with that being said, I gotta go. This was an amazing live stream, and again, thank you for all 4,000 of you who've shown up. And
unbelievable.
I gotta go, but. This was
all right.
This was interesting. This was
hilarious.
So, some people are saying that this was like another OJ. Let me end this poll.
This is not like an OJ.
I don't think
this is not all like an OJ case. No, it's not. I wouldn't even put up that poll.
They did a good enough job to get a conviction, but I think at the end of the day, the
charges were stupid.
They didn't
at the end of the day, the charges were stupid.
Well enough. And
you don't buy the case.
Diddy
That's the problem.
Hell of a bullet here. I think he dodged a hell of a bullet here.
Yeah, he did.
I just think he did.
Great work by his defense team.
And I think the prosecution lost this case because of Jane. Jane lost lost the prosecution's case. Jane was an idiot. And I think she lost.
Jane was a terrible charge.
With that being said, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do like, great.
It was a terrible charge.
I'm out.
Oh my God.
Take care, guys.
Don't worry about the typos. All right, so he's out. Let's see what we can Let me see who else is out there. Oh my God. So I'm going to ask, I will put a poll up. I'm curious your thoughts. Do you think that justice was served? I actually had a video that, I can't believe how well I boomered this. We're supposed to go live an hour. We're supposed to go live 3 hours ago. Now I got to decide whether I want to put it up there live or not. Oh my God. I put the wrong date on. I put it for July 3rd instead of July 2nd. I got Lady Lawgic calling me. Hold on a second. I don't think she realizes that I'm streaming. Wow. What are your thoughts? Do you think that this was justice done or not? Let me put that poll up here. I'm going to see if I can find other stuff. Other stuff here. I should have had Nate send them over to me. He didn't see my text. I sent it to him like right when he shut down. Woo! I told you, as I was watching this trial, it's like I hate both sides here. I don't even know who to root for. Everything about these charges was so completely messed up. And he is a terrible person. I'm sorry. That guy's mean. He's mean to like everyone. He's mean to everyone. He's very charming, and he's manipulative. I shouldn't be talking so bad about Diddy. I can't mark myself free from Diddy anymore. I can't mark myself free. Diddy's gonna walk out soon. Diddy's gonna come hunting me down. Wow. So in case you joined late, Diddy was convicted on counts 3 and 5, which is interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution. Those charges carry with them a maximum of 10 years apiece. But the most serious charges 1, 2, and 4, 1 being RICO, 2 and 4 being trafficking of Jane and Cassie. For those, he walked. I'm going to tell you this. One more thing I should add in here. Jane charge was stupid. And the big moment, I don't know if I shared with you guys. I don't think I shared with anyone yet. I'm going to tell you a story. I have a war story about a quasi-celebrity that I met at the trial in the bathroom. Yeah. I kept his name. I kept this story from out of all my reporting. Just I was like, let me save this. But I'll share the story with you in a few moments. I'll share it on this stream. I'm going to get there. But I have a really funny story of someone who I end up taking a whiz next to, basically. And I was just like, wait, aren't you? And he's like, yeah. So, but I'll get to that in a moment. I'll get to that. A crazy story. Let me see what else we have. Let me see who else I can find here talking about this online. Teaser Tell's gonna be so mad. Teaser Tell's gonna be so freaking angry. Okay.
What were their stories? What were the options in terms of, if I'm a prosecuting attorney, do I need to take a chance and have them on that stand? Or have I made my point? And I think that each side did their due diligence to bring the witnesses before the jury, make their case. As the defense did, they said, hey, I'm going to punch holes in these particular witnesses that you're bringing prosecution. And apparently it worked. But I think that one thing that people have to remember is this. When it comes to him getting out, this is a man that was convicted. This is a man that when he came to New York, as William said, he's someone who brought drugs and was set up for a freak off and was going to continue in that same vein. If I were the defense, though, I would say that was also a man who was addicted to drugs. This is someone now who is not addicted to drugs. He is also someone now who knows that his fate is a lot more important than he would have ever thought of. And I would make that argument on that side.
Right,
I think I'm for the prosecution to say, why would he?
Let me find something better. Sorry. Sorry about that. Let's see what Court TV has going on. They probably got something. No, that's not it. Dag nabbit. Let me see if we have here. Teaser Tells probably outside the trial. Oh my God. Oh my God. The Diddy verdict. We got live. I don't want these. I'd rather. I don't know this guy. Never seen that guy.
Trial on a daily basis. Lisa,
I
first
saw.
of all, thanks for joining us.
I saw
here.
Lisa there.
What can you tell us about what was going on inside that courtroom during the verdict?
I saw Lisa there every day.
What's been going on during the verdict today? Okay, well, first of all, when the verdict was read, of course, the biggest concern was
I'm still not sure about Lisa.
That RICO charge that Sean Diddy Combs was facing. This has been the concern throughout this trial because that is the one that carries the heaviest potential sentence. Now, let's just give you an idea of what's happening at the latest. The latest right now is that the prosecutors have asked for a couple of hours to try to figure out whether or not Combs can get bail. So he was convicted on two counts of the transportation for prostitution. And the fact of the matter is that's the least of all the charges. It's still a very serious charge. So he remains.
Oh, I still think he should have been convicted on
news, they were
Cassie.
cheering, they were
I think it was
clapping,
wrong for him not to be convicted on
in
Cassie.
the courtroom. They've been praying throughout, and a big showing of family members, including
not
even
Lisa.
Combs' mother, Dana Tran, here in court. We've seen this week, along with Combs' mother, the sons, the daughters, and other family members. And
I did think he would be convicted on
what's
Cassie.
Happening now is he can't just walk right out that door here, and there's a huge crowd of hundreds of people outside the courthouse right now, ready to
but here's the thing, though.
themselves in whatever way they are.
Here's the thing.
In support or in dismay at this particular verdict. So
part of the reason you don't feel bad for Cassie if you're a juror is this. She did not seem upset with him. When she was on the stand, Cassie presented herself as somebody who was totally fine with seeing him sent to jail for 50 years or having dinner with him next week. She just seemed completely done with all this. She's like, yeah, there was some amazing times and there was some really brutal times. Yeah. He's she talked about him when she was asked on cross-examination. They're talking about drugs. Okay. So on cross-examination, she's being asked about drugs for 15, 20 minutes. And which drugs they used, she used, Diddy used, her friends used, this and that. And Agnifilo asked her, what do you think Sean was addicted to? And her response was success. Okay? That's not someone who loathes Sean Combs. That's on the one hand. That's one element as far as why you don't feel as if Cassie is out there looking for justice, that you want to give her justice. The other element is when she brought her civil suit in November 2023, first she wrote a book and she tried selling it to him for $30 million. Saying, I'll sell you the book rights for $30 million. And he said, GFY, not interested. So she sued him. And when she sued him, she said she sued him for $30 million. How did Diddy react when he got sued for $30 million? He settled the day after the lawsuit was filed for $20 million. So she got $20 million from him. And then she brought a lawsuit against the Intercontinental for the way things happened with that whole video. And when she brought that lawsuit, she settled with them for $10 million, which means if you do the math real quick here, 20 plus 10, 20 plus 10, 20 plus 10, lawyer math says $30 million. So if you're sitting on the jury and you say to yourself, this woman got $30 million, it's not just that she happened to get $30 million. It's not just that she got $30 million for what she went through. That's literally every penny that she felt she was damaged. So if you're sitting there on the jury, you feel as if she's not angry at him. And she got literally every penny that she was looking for. 20 of it from Sean, 10 from the Intercontinental, and you sort of feel like she's been made whole. So you're not sitting there saying, I want to get justice for Cassie. You're not thinking that at all.
Case versus women, and how you see that influencing what happened here.
Yes, I know oftentimes when we look at jurors, we look
Buddha's
at race
awesome.
or gender. And yes,
Thank
there's
you.
a possibility
Well,
that the number of
Appreciate
men
that.
in this case could have been beneficial to Sean Combs in terms of trying to decide what this relationship was like. But I think probably more importantly than race or gender would be age. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to the conversation as to whether or not these were consensual relationships, which appears to be at the heart of the jury's verdict in terms of saying, yes, we saw that you brought these people across state lines for prostitution, but we don't believe there was force, fraud, or coercion for trafficking, and we don't believe that there was a criminal enterprise or that there was not two predicate acts, right? I think a large part of the not believing comes down to consent. And what I find, at least when I talk to a jury or just talk to people in general, is there's a big divide in terms of what is consent when you talk to someone who is over the age of 40.
Brian, the consent has nothing to do with whether or not there's kidnapping. Consent has nothing to do with whether or not there's arson. Consent has nothing to do with whether or not there is obstruction. All of these were predicates. The only one that there's consent is relevant to would be the trafficking charges. That's the only one where there's relevance to consent. So
or 45 and under the age of 40 or 45.
This guy's a very stylish guy.
We're more than half
his clothing every day. He spends a lot.
4 years old.
He spends
even below.
He spends a lot on his wardrobe.
Who are in their 40s. I think the conversation and the argument that Mark Agnifilo and his team were having about what it means to consent.
I had never heard of Brian.
Works for people in that age demographic.
But
I think if we had a jury,
he was very popular down in the courtroom
in their 20s or early 30s,
and he was there every day. This guy
would be very different. So while I do see that there is value in looking at the gender or the sex of the jurors, I think the age told us a lot more based on the arguments we saw.
Bernarda, you think it was smart that Sean Combs did not take the stand?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If Sean Combs would have taken the stand, this case would have become a deliberation of whether this jury believed what Sean Combs had to say, whether his demeanor came off as one as credible. Also, you have to think
this woman said over and over again, he's guilty, guilty,
there was
guilty,
a lot of
guilty.
Evidence that the prosecution was not able to get in their case. And
she's a big fan of Brian. I'm just gonna say that she's a very big fan of Brian. This woman.
Chief, because they were missing.
Just watching both of them, she was in the courtroom every day. Also,
so they would have been able to get that evidence in had Sean Combs testified.
The two of them would sit together a lot.
Changed the deliberation process, and we would have probably been looking at a completely different verdict. Also, got to think, how would he be able?
It was
to
insane to think he would ever take the stand. No one thought in their right mind that she was going to take the stand.
Aaron, do you think we'll hear from the family? Sean Combs' mother, Janice, was in the courtroom along with his sons, his daughters. Are they expected to speak?
This guy I didn't see ever, but it could be, to be fair, it could be that he managed to get into the courtroom.
Of this trial, but the cars that they've been using to transport themselves.
So that doesn't mean he wasn't there, but I don't remember seeing this guy a single time.
And they should be walking out those golden doors any moment. They may opt to wait until they know whether Combs is going to get released on bail, as his defense attorney argued.
The way the setup here is ABC and all the legacy media are across the street from the building and shooting their cameras in direction of the building.
Members of his family in the gallery, I'm coming home, baby, after the split verdict here, acquitting him of the most serious charges, but finding him guilty of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And because that is not a violent crime.
Ethnic breakdown, there was only a couple of black people.
Earned the right
black
to get
women.
Released on $1 million bail, as Combs offered to put up.
Mostly older white folks.
Support outside of the courthouse there. The cheers that were heard from inside the courtroom, we should point out, it's because he had his mom and his kids inside that courtroom. But if you want to talk about people showing up to support Sean Combs throughout all of this, the only celebrity that
I want to check on Tiza Tells. She's probably crying. I mean, not literally, but she really wanted to see conviction. she live? She is live.
The investigation. Okay.
She worked her tail off.
There were no wiretaps or phone warrants. The investigation,
she's not,
or no investigating, or maybe there is about the people around him. Again, we can talk about the investigation. We know that Damian Lewis had to leave. We knew they did the best they could. But again, let's not act like Diddy did not have a lock on anything and everybody, okay? Again, the claim of Jane, we have to argue, as a victim on the prosecution's side,
Jane's case had no
full
chance.
well that Diddy was paying for the lawyer that was advising on how to testify. This is what people are saying, okay? On top of that, right?
Wow. Look at that. 20,000 live viewers.
Witnesses, especially after the other ones were maybe didn't do the best on cross. I think that was a strategic gamble that Diddy made, and I think it turned out very well.
Obviously.
What was the actual strategic gamble? We need to look at it for what it was. They thought the defense was going to call people. And at the end of the day, the defense decided not to call anybody. That was another huge, it was a gamble, and the gamble paid off.
Yep.
Okay?
It was.
Again, I stand 10 toes down. I think this was a miscarriage of justice. I think the jury got it wrong. But the jury was older. They were misogynistic. They were horrible. Okay? Another mistake, I believe. Okay? Not charging other co-conspirators. It looked crazy for Diddy to be sitting there by himself and claiming a criminal enterprise, okay? And making all the co-conspirators sit there in the court together. The way
this is a massive loss for the government.
They could have used this opportunity to dig through what Diddy had been doing illegally, but this is what money can buy you. Mark Agnifilo, he did it. Oh, I saw him in the elevator. He actually made a comment, right? Some people from ABC asked him, how did this happen, right? The fact that they're, and he said that this was a big win, okay? Somebody asked him, how did your big win feel? He said, in 35 years, I have never felt like this. He was looking like he had just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And they said, how do you feel? He said, I'm relieved that I don't feel miserable. I'm relieved that I do not feel miserable.
Interesting.
And he said in 35 years, he has never felt like this. Again, it defies logic and it defies
It doesn't defy logic.
That this jury found that man innocent of all that. The kidnapping, the arson, the robbery.
I tried telling her.
And they said it didn't matter. They said those women's pain didn't matter. They said their bodies didn't matter. They said it didn't matter. And there are a bunch of idiots that literally are celebrating depravity.
There are a lot of people.
That you can use people as party favors. They're celebrating they could get away. And I get it. I see why Diddy and his family are celebrating. They want to get their money back. They want to get their lives back. But these bottom lickers that are celebrating. What's going on with that? What is going on with that? Again, I'm not going to even, I am so disappointed, not just in the jury,
I told you she's going to be crying.
And in the public and in what that means. I am disappointed and I am disgusted. A red flag should have been those crap men laughing at his stupid misogynistic rape jokes, laughing at painting Cassie as a ho-ho-ho, laughing at all that. It should have been something of it. And it lets us know it's sending, listen, forget the Me Too movement because they always like to bring that up. It lets you know they don't think you matter. They don't think your pain matters.
That's not what they're saying.
They would die if it was their mom.
That's not what they're saying. What they are saying is they didn't believe Jane, which no one believed Jane was trafficked. No, Jane didn't believe Jane was trafficked. No one believed she was trafficked. And they thought Cassie was much more brutally treated than Jane. It's not even close. Like physically, emotionally, everything that happened there, that Cassie was a much more terrible situation. There's a claim by Jane, which only came up in April of this year for the first time, is that she ever told anyone that she was physically assaulted one time a year ago in June of 2024. And she told this very lengthy story, which I broke down on one of my streams, of the crazy story she told. So she wasn't physically assaulted. She wasn't blackmailed. There was no incident where he's like, I'm going to release these videos and we're going to have a freak off. That never happened to her. All those things happened to Cassie. If you believe anything about Cassie's story, if you believe anything about Cassie's story, all those things happened to her. But she got her justice. She got all the justice she was seeking. So I'm not surprised.
Somebody with them, right? It doesn't matter. The whole point is, even with the Combs family, this is what I mean about the hostility. I didn't bring those charges. I stand by. I believe what the government said, and I stand by the victims. But the fact that now, and this is what that dream team actually did, they let this man back on the street.
That's
right?
not
Because
no,
now
okay.
let's talk about everybody that didn't lick his
I
feet.
can't. That's not cool. That's not cool. Don't go attacking the defense counsel there, Tiza. That's not cool. You can't attack defense counsel. They're helping make sure that the judicial system is working. That's what they make the state prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They did not act in ways that were improper. They didn't do anything improper at all. There was nothing with the way that they handled the case. And I've covered cases where we've seen people do things that seemed really improper. That's not what happened here. That is not what happened here. So yeah, I cannot abide by faulting them. I don't agree with doing that. You can't fault them. So that was Tiza Tells, and I knew she was going to be upset. I knew she was going to be upset. I knew she was going to be very upset because every time I went on her channel, and I like her. She works really hard. But I think that to start pointing fingers at the defense as if they've done something wrong here, I can't agree with that one. I'm doing a search here to see. I'm going to put a poll up. Do you think justice was done here? Let's put a poll up. Let me do that. Plus, start a poll. Diddy found. That's justice. Injustice. I'm curious about whether that's justice or injustice. Diddy was found guilty on 2 smaller charges and acquitted on the 3 major charges. Wow.
You could see him sitting for a deposition. You could see him sitting at a trial and giving testimony.
Could you see him plead the fifth and say, I don't want to do anything to incriminate myself?
Well, at this point, the only time you could see the fifth being pled is when there
100%.
is a real risk of criminal prosecution.
100%.
And that's not
so if it relates to these charges, no. If it relates to potential drug issues, stuff like that, yes, I could see that there would maybe be an argument, but you get a lot less rights as a defendant in a civil case than you do in a criminal.
Okay, I want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. If you're still with me there, Kristen.
I am.
I think a lot of people wondered whether this trial would produce evidence, claims, things we did not know about, other people that had been involved in this
Of
enterprise
course
in some
not.
way,
That's a dumb
either
question.
joining him in some of
The
the criminal
prosecution
behavior that
was
had been
never going to
alleged,
do that.
victims who we didn't know
The
about.
prosecution was
And there
never
were
going
some
to do
things that were new. But for the most part, Kristen, a lot of
That
the
wasn't-
material that came out were things that were sort of what we already knew, just more
It's
detail,
dark
if you
blue,
will. For
not
instance,
black.
right? There were not some
Navy
bombshell people walking into court saying, hey, I was a victim, or hey, I was engaged in these freak-offs. We didn't see other people indicted either, at least not yet. Of course, there's still time here. But do you think that had any effect at all on this jury?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. And I think the other thing that's really important here too, Laura, is you're right. Like throughout the trial, the testimony and the evidence that the jury saw was not what we all saw from a public perspective in all of the many documentaries that came
I don't know
out
who this is.
talking about all of the
I don't
different
remember seeing her at all.
individuals who assisted. And some
I
of
don't
those
know who this
individuals
is.
were not called to testify within this trial. Yes, the trial had a number of witnesses, 34, I think, to be exact. But some of the survivors.
I want to see if Uda is live. He probably is. And Uda's awesome. Let's see if Uda is live. You live, Uda? Uda. Oh, the Academy's there.
Just like head down, head
He's
down,
watching
trying
Sean
to
G.
write. Puffy beat the feds, man. Puffy
Sean
took
G
the
was
feds
really
to
hoping for
trial and
acquittal.
beat 'em.
This guy was there every day, the guy in the hat.
Puffy beat the feds.
Every day. And he was great. I mean, he was very dedicated toward Diddy throughout the trial.
The judge
The
then
Academy
told
here
the jury that
apparently was
you don't
saying that
have
he
to
covered
abide
some
by
of my stuff
nothing
also.
that you have had to abide by for the last 7 weeks. You're free to do whatever you want. If you want to speak to the members of the press, just be mindful and careful of the privacy of your fellow jurors. You're
There you
free
go.
to leave. You could do whatever it is that you want. Mark Agnifilo stood up. Mark Agnifilo stood up and said, Your Honor, Tenny Garagos is crying. Anna Estevello, his
She
other
did a great
attorney,
job.
she crying.
Estevello did a great job also.
They crying. They crying. Mark Agnifilo stood up and said, Your Honor. Mark Agnifilo stood up and said, Your Honor. Come on, man. Get your ass up out of here.
Get your ass up on out of here. Talk, huh?
Let's go, man.
Let's go. Hurry up.
Go. Gotta be doing all that.
Come on, man.
There's a lot of noise in the background there. It's much louder when you're there.
Mark Agnifilo stood up.
It's a lot louder when you're there than when you're actually hearing it, and you sort of like, I don't know if anyone can even hear me when you hear when the sirens go off behind you. I think the government approach on the case was the biggest flaw. The biggest flaw. The two massive flaws were the nature of the charges. I don't like the way these charges were brought. I don't like the way these charges were used. I don't think RICO was meant to be used for someone who's wasting money. In other words, he's engaging in this crime to feed his sexual predilections rather than actually RICO was meant to be for the mob, for people who are racketeering so that they can shake down a community. So I didn't like the way it was used with Trump in the Georgia case, with the whole that federal indictment. I didn't like the way it was used here. If they're shaking down a community, shaking down people down, that's what RICO's meant for. And I did not like the fact that trafficking, this is what you need to understand about trafficking is designed similarly also to stop people from making money. How are they trying to make money? They're trying to make money by taking someone's value, which is their value from the perspective of a sick audience. So there's a value to that is assessed by a sick audience who's happy to take advantage of young people. And there's that, and they seek to maximize that by basically turning them into slaves and selling them off to whoever walks in with $5 or $50 or whatever. That's what trafficking is. You're trafficking so you want to get money. Now, just because the elements are met here, the reality is this is not what trafficking is supposed to be. Trafficking is that you're the one the defendant is the one taking the money in, not the defendant is the one spending the money. And that's why the element of commercial sex, it's poor. I think it's poorly worded in the statute to open up this doorway for prosecutors to bring charges like this. It should be not just commercial sex, but someone who's making money by doing this, by kidnapping people and selling them off to others. That's what trafficking is supposed to be. And what this was a guy who was burning through money for the purposes of trying to feed his own appetite. That's not what trafficking is supposed to be. So in that sense, I was like, I'm not going to be happy with anything here because he is a terrible human being. He's a monster. Now, during the cross-examination of Cassie, they tried using her. Agnifilo tried using her. I mean, I'll give him proper congratulations to Maureen Comey. And Maureen Comey is the one who's most likely directly responsible for the nature of the charges that were brought. So you got RICO charge. The three most serious charges were RICO and the two trafficking charges. I just explained to you why I don't think trafficking is the right charge here. And I don't think RICO was meant to be used this way either. I don't like the idea of it being bastardized. So, yeah, there were a lot of charges you could have brought. There were a lot of charges, although some of them were beyond the statute of limitations, likely. But I thought I would hate whatever result would come in, and it turns out I'm cool with that. I even have a video up about watching the proof that he violated 18 U.S.C. 1591 with respect to Cassie. There's a video out there, which the state says this is trafficking. This is trafficking. So, and it was supposed to go out 7:45 this morning. I'm such a boomer, and it's going out tomorrow morning, unless I move it up. But I was worried about getting clearance from YouTube also. I was like, the language in there, some of the stuff in there, it's not a pretty thing to say. So that's what we got. Let me see if there's anyone else out there. Ved says, prayers for all the overlord and family. May justice be served, fears be alleviated, and doors test negative. Oh, indeed. Indeed. No, it wasn't. No, Mann Act was a way for the federal government to say, we want to charge for sex crimes. That's what the Mann Act was. It's so broad, the Mann Act. It is so incredibly broad. It is so incredibly broad. Let me see if there's anyone else out there who I recognize before I get on out of here. I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you my story and the celebrity that I met in the bathroom last week. I walk into the bathroom at the Diddy trial. So the courtroom where Diddy's trial is ongoing is the top floor in the building. There's 26 floors, and it's on the 26th floor. The viewing room is on the 24th floor. That's where I was every day. Some days it was in the early days of the trial, it was on the 23rd floor. Most of the trial, I was on the 24th floor. Last week, I was on the 24th floor. I go into the bathroom there, and I look over to my left, standing next to me, was a man who looked like an expensive-looking suit. I glanced up, and I'm like, it was like this. This is what I looked like. You're Brian Steele. I said, are you Brian Steele? So he said, yeah. I said, dude, you're a legend. Now, that's awkward. That's awkward saying that to a guy while you're both there relieving yourselves. But that's what came out. Dude, you're a legend. And he's like, thanks. I said, the way you handled Judge Glanville was just incredible. The guy showed balls of steel. That was too perfect. Yes, he showed balls of steel. Brian Steele. I'm staying next to him in the urinal. I didn't say that to him. That probably would have gone awkward right there. That would have gone awkward right there. And he started talking to me, and I started talking to him about the defense's approach. This was right after the state, or during the state's. This was near the end of the state's closing arguments, and I told him I have some thoughts for him about closing arguments, and then I shared them with him. Some of which came up in their closing arguments as to where I would expect them to hit. And I told them they should hit. One of the things I told them is you definitely want to hit on the $30 million that Cassie got. I said, you're not going to get, I said, he's not getting convicted on, he asked me how I thought the case was going. And I said, you're not going to get, I said, he's not going to get convicted on Jane. Cassie and RICO are tougher. And I should have invited him on. You think I didn't invite him on? Of course I invited him on. I told him I'm an attorney turned podcaster, and I'd love to have him on. And maybe I will get him on soon. Maybe I will get him on soon. He said he was very nice. He texted me, and I've been texting him since. Don't make it weird. But yeah, so I bumped into Brian Steele. I actually was walking with him after I was walking upstairs with him because he had to get back up to the room. So I was walking back upstairs with him. I will say this, in person, when I looked at him, I was like, and before I asked my question, I said, this is either Brian Steele or it's Jeffrey Epstein. In person, he looks a lot like Jeffrey Epstein. And I was like, I doubt it's Jeffrey Epstein. And Brian Steele is a lot better guess. He looks a lot like him, at least profile, which is, yeah. So there you go. But the guy is a legend. The way he stood up to Glanville. He's legend both for the guts that he showed and for not backing down, even being willing to go to prison for his clients. Impressive. It's impressive. And he was smart. Like his arguments were logical. So that's what we got. I had a bunch of people who were asking me to jump on their channel, and I'm probably going to do that. I'm probably going to land my plane very soon. Let me just. Let me see if Branko's. Is Branko live now? Self-defense. Oh, self-defense. No, he's not live, but I'm probably going to pop on his channel later today. I also had the quartering, who I'm probably going to be doing something with him as well. So he was texting me and asking me if I wanted. Good job, sir. All right, let me see. I want to see how my poll came out. If you guys think that this was justice or not. 60, almost 2/3 of you think it's injustice. 63% saying it's injustice. 37% saying justice. All right. No, I cannot prove that Brian Steele is not Jeffrey Epstein, but I would be really surprised. And the voice doesn't sound the same. So, and I have a lot more respect for Brian Steele than I have for Jeffrey Epstein. It's not a comment on anything. I'm not trying to imply anything about Brian. It's supposed to be having a bail hearing in an hour and a half. That's what I'm seeing here. That's what I'm seeing here. Bail hearing in an hour and a half. At 1 o'clock is when he's supposed to be. At 1 o'clock Eastern is when he's supposed to be having his bail hearing. I'm not going there for the bail hearing. I don't think I would even make it if I tried. So, be close. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. All right. So that's what we got. I think I'm going to land my plane here. My final thoughts on this are as follows. First and foremost, please like, share, and subscribe. I busted my tail for this trial. And yeah, if you can hit that like, share, and subscribe, I would be most obliged. So that's the first thing I got to get out of there. I got to get off my mind. Second thing is these charges were bunk. The Jane charge probably cost them. That was something that we saw someone say, and I think I would agree with you. This case started feeling much more like a Free Diddy vibe after Jane got up and took the stand. And that's not to say she wasn't credible. I personally found her to be credible when she was on the stand. When she's telling her story, she sounded to me, at least me, and several other people I spoke with, she sounded very believable. But even if you believed everything she was saying, she wasn't trafficked. I believed her. I just was like, this isn't trafficking. Even if she's saying, I hate it, or she's sometimes texting saying, I want to do more, whatever, it wasn't trafficking. Because every time she says, this is what you do for your partner. This is what you do for your lover. Well, if that's what you think, then you agreed. How is he forming mens rea? If he thinks he talked you into it, if he thinks you agreed, that's a relationship dispute. That's not a criminal charge. This is something that happens all the time. How many people have not? Everyone has gotten into a fight with their significant other where one side caves, the other doesn't. And you might have one side that caves a lot more frequently than the other because of the power dynamic in the relationship or countless other reasons. You're gonna say that something you're gonna throw him in prison for 15 years when he doesn't know about a single incident that she doesn't want to do it. And I will say about that one incident that she talked of there being violence. Even if you believe her story, and I do, okay? I believe her story. I think her story, even if you believe her story, and I'm not saying I'm positive it happened. I lean more toward it happening than it not happening. This story happened on June 18, 2024. She's mad at him. She gets into a fight with him. She slams his head down. That's what starts the physical fight. I don't think that justifies anything. But there's a whole back and forth there where he pops her a couple of times and she goes and runs away and comes back and he belts her some, he throws her around some more. He's dragging her around some more. And then and supposedly slapping her when she was in the shower. A year ago, this was. And I believe the story. And then he wants a free call, what they call a hotel night. With Jane, it wasn't called free calls, it's called hotel nights. And I'll tell you that I think that she did it. I think she did it because I'm going to invite Nate. I'm going to invite Nate up here. Nate is coming on. I got. Let me see if Viva's still alive. I think she chose to do it. Even that night, I think she chose to do it. That night, I felt she chose to do it. I think that he saw on her phone, he went through her phone, and when he went through her phone, he saw that she was in contact with one of the performers that they had regularly retained by the name of Anton, and that she had met with him, and he learned, and she felt guilty. She felt guilty that while they were on a break, that she bumped, this is according to her in this part of her story, I don't personally believe, that she bumped into him, that she was at a party of some iconic rap star, which everyone is speculating is Kanye, celebrating his wife or girlfriend's birthday in January of 2024 in Vegas, and she bumps into Anton there. And he's performing at this party. So, and they had texted a couple of times, and Diddy didn't believe her. He thought that she performed with him at that party and that she cheated on him. And she seemed to feel very guilty. She kept saying, she told us on the stand that she didn't, that all she did was talk to him for a few minutes. I don't really believe her because she seems to feel so guilty. You don't feel so guilty if you did nothing. And he had Anton come and he had her perform with her. And that he was like revolted watching her with him that night. And I think that she was performing that night after she'd been physically assaulted by Diddy, because I do think that he physically assaulted her, but that she was performing trying to find a way to please him because she felt guilt. Even if she hadn't cheated on him with Anton, which is weird to say cheated on with a guy that that Diddy's watched her engage in activity many times, but outside his presence, I guess, is considered cheating on him. So she seemed like she felt guilty. Indeed, that night, him learning about Anton, they end up breaking up over it. He's like, I can't look at you the same anymore. So I don't think that anything about that night, her performance, was that she felt forced because of the physical assault. I think she felt forced because she felt guilt, like she owed something to him. Either rightly feeling like she should be guilty because she had done something with Anton, or perceiving that Diddy felt she was guilty and she was trying to please Diddy. Not out of fear of further beatings, not out of blackmail, not out of him forcing her, but her trying to please Diddy just as she was every other time she did this. And that's a choice. It's a degrading choice, and I think that he's a terrible human being for basically getting his jollies out of degrading women, and specific women that he seems to look to degrade, that they have to be basically, stars on some level, celebrities in the news already. Cassie was someone in the news when he met her. Jane is someone, who had been with someone who was very famous. So she was in all the gossip rags before she came to Diddy. And I think he wanted to degrade these women. That's what it was a power thing. And he wanted to degrade them. So yeah. I think this was a terrible, I think he's a terrible human being, but I think certainly Jane, and here's the problem. Once Jane was done, and most people were concluding this is not trafficking, it left a very sour taste about Cassie. And I can see how that would relate back in the minds of the jury, that we don't really feel like we need to get justice for Cassie. And then they're sitting there trying to figure out, how do we get around this whole RICO thing? So everything started snowballing and they didn't have the Jane charge in there in the initial indictment or even in the first superseding indictment. They only threw it in there after she told them the story in like April of this year. That, hey, now that we have this incident, now we're going to try and get him on trafficking Jane also. And that was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. They would have done better to just leave her out of it altogether. They would have done much better to just leave her out of it altogether and just focus on Cassie. I'm not saying they would have gotten a conviction, but it dragged the case out longer. The longer the case was going on, the more of a pro-Diddy vibe was going on. Now, I'm releasing a video that I'm going to ask you all to check out and share, because it's a breakdown that in the closing arguments, a video of Diddy trafficking Cassie. Legally trafficking, under the law, trafficking. It's going to be dropping on YouTube, and I'm going to throw up on Rumble also. There's a decent chance he'll walk out today. I would think, if I was a judge, I would let him. I would put up a hefty bail. I'd say put up $5 million. Put up $5 million. Maybe even more. Although he could get out for $1 million. Something that he's not going to flee. But I would give him the bail. Because I think he might get out for time served. There's a lot of speculation that he'll get out for time served if on just those two charges alone. I'm gonna invite Nate in here to get his thoughts. I'll give him a few minutes. We'll stick around here for just another couple minutes. Let me see who else, if there's anyone else out there who I recognize. That's not it. I'm somehow related to this whole thing. I think he's friends with Diddy, this guy. This is the other side of the street, the side of the courthouse. There's chaos going on there all the time. This woman over here with the red highlights. Oh, it's not her. It's a different one. There was one woman there who was just annoying every day. Wasn't her though. Built like her. It's a very slow land on this one. I'm going to give Nate like another 2 minutes or so to get in here. Let's see what Uncivil is saying. Uncivil law.
Cause of action.
Oh, he got Nate.
So I'm going to play with that and see if I can make it work. And so I can get that in because I have a deadline on the 15th.
All right. Well, if you need help with anything, just let me know, bro.
It sounds like
go
because
I know everybody's been calling me to stop by. I got I'm gonna go stop by Joe and say hello to him real quick before I get out of here. I got some more videos I got to shoot this weekend, so it's just been so hard. I feel so drained, just so drained down. So.
It's a rough
but
life.
it's okay. All right, listen, guys. Listen, thanks for the
bless, Nate.
Uncivil Law chat. I will be seeing you guys
All
sooner
right.
than later.
Take out the link,
and listen, bro, we're doing it again. I'll see you at 12:00 though for Kohlberger.
You want to come on the stream?
Yeah, if you can, throw me the card.
I'll send you a new link.
All right, so there you go. He's doing that in an hour and a half. So I guess Nate's on his way over here. I'll give him another. I'm giving you another like 3 minutes, Nate. I'm giving you 3 minutes. That's your notice. That's your notice. Why don't I see here? There he is. There he is.
Yo, people of the internet, what's going on?
I am great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, fantastic as of right now. But you know about the stuff that I've been going through. So
yeah. I'm your mic is I think a little louder than mine, but I'll let people let me know.
I'll turn it down.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts? I was watching you a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My mic is really, really hot. Hold on. Let me just turn this mic down a little bit. Sorry. Yeah, my mic was really, really hot. All right, there it is. It should be better now. Yeah. So my thoughts on what's going on with Diddy was well, first, I was watching you a little bit earlier.
Okay.
All right. So everybody understands what's going on. RICO is how generally they use to catch people like this. Another big case where the person was convicted of RICO and sex trafficking, R. Kelly. RICO and sex trafficking. That was R. Kelly. Harvey Weinstein, they caught him on a RICO charge too. So a lot of people believe that RICO was kind of like something foreign to this type of arena, but it's not. It's what the government uses all the time in these particular cases of sex trafficking. Generally, it also accounts for RICO charge. The second thing is with this RICO, the two predicates, they actually found Diddy guilty of RICO predicates. The two RICO predicates of the Mann Act, the going across state lines for prostitution, those were two RICO predicates. Those alone satisfied the RICO predicates. So this jury just didn't believe that this was a criminal enterprise. They thought this was more personal. So that's why they found not guilty on the RICO, even though they did find him guilty on the underlying predicates, two predicates. And I'm assuming they found him guilty on more of the predicates, like, for instance, the drug distribution. As a former prosecutor, people don't understand what drug distribution is. So let's say if I have some weed and I'm smoking it and I pass it to Joe and he starts smoking it and he passes somebody else. Every time we pass it, that's drug distribution. Me smoking and passing to Joe is drug distribution.
Even if you don't charge money.
No, it's you don't need to. You don't have to give me back anything of value because it's distribution. I'm handing it to somebody else. That's all drug distributions. As a matter of fact, it says that in the law. A sale is not required.
Mm-hmm.
So just by the fact of me giving you the drugs, it's me distributing them. So that is drug distribution. So you can't tell me that all of that, the fact that they had him, I think they had him stone cold on drug distribution. I think they had him stone cold on the having prostitutes cross state lines, right? They had that stone cold. So I think the only reason why they didn't find him guilty of RICO was because they didn't think it was a criminal organization. They thought he was doing all this personally. This was his personal thing, which is fine. But so they didn't see the conspiracy. So that's RICO. Now with the sex trafficking with Jane Doe, you believe Jane Doe was credible. I'm just telling you, I don't think she was. It's just because she was doing freak offs with other people other than Diddy. She was getting paid by Diddy. She getting $10,000 a month, right? It was like her story to me the facts of the story just seem, and I wasn't in the courtroom. You were in there, so you heard it live.
Well, to clarify,
Mm-hmm.
I believed her, but I think I've said since day one, believing her is to believe that she wasn't trafficked.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Meaning, the charge to me didn't make sense because she routinely referred to why she was doing it. Well, this is what you do for your partner. This is what you do for your lover. That's a choice she's making.
Yeah, that's not
being forced. Right. So I felt that, and even the one night that she testified about, which is a night she first told this story in April of this year for the first time to prosecutors, was how she was beaten, and she got into a big fight with him, and then afterwards they had a freak off. That freak off afterwards, I was just explaining to my audience, when she tells her story over, it seems as if she's telling over because she felt guilty because Diddy, during the course of that fight, found out that she had met up with Anton, one of the performers who she had performed with, while they were on a break, and that Diddy didn't trust her and thought that she cheated on him, and that they had a very short hotel night, which is what she called freak offs, and that it was miserable for everyone, her, Diddy, everyone, and that was the end of their relationship. He could never look at her the same because he felt that she cheated on him. So that's not her being forced because the physical stuff or blackmail. That's her performing that she's trying to regain favor. Again, a choice that she's making. So I didn't feel that I was like, this is definitely not. There's no way. This is not trafficking.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. I think it was a mistake to actually bring Jane up there because it didn't seem to me she was sex trafficked at all. It seemed 100%. She was making choices. She was doing this. And I'll even say, like with Cassie, I think the reason why they didn't find Cassie was sex trafficked, because with Cassie, that hotel beating video where she was beaten and all that stuff, most people don't realize that she requested a freak off after that. Like, she went to freak offs after that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And even the other horrible things that happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
Then they play tapes after those events where she's saying she loves a freak off. She can't wait to do another one, that type of thing. So I think the defense was beautifully put. If we do 75 freak offs, she's saying number 59 wasn't good, but the rest of them, number 60, 62, like all the rest of them are good. So she's like, out of all this, you're telling me one, number 75 is a sex trafficking, but number 76. I think people fail to realize, especially people who are not lawyers, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Cassie's story gave you a lot of reasonable doubt. Jane's story gave you a lot of reasonable doubt. Cassie's less than Jane. I believe Cassie. I believe she was trafficked. But if I'm just being fair to the story, if you're being trafficked, why do you keep going back? If you're being trafficked, why do you keep going back? And this all hit the head until she eventually left. Now, I understand this Munchausen syndrome, those type of syndromes where you fall in love with your kidnappers and all that stuff. I do understand that. But if you're telling a jury that this was so horrible, so bad, so crazy, for 10 years I went through this, but then you hear the messages and stuff where it's like, I'm a willing participant. I wanted, even after the bad stuff, it's just going to be hard. It's hard to convince somebody that one time is sex trafficking, but the other 20 times were not sex trafficking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I definitely get that. I definitely understand that. There's just, as far as looking at number 59, right? That one time, which you think about it, there was so much there that to prove that he could have been hanged on. Yes. Meaning, there's blackmailing, and he's literally blackmailing her, and he's extorting her. He's basically humiliating her for 5 hours on a flight back from Paris, from France to New York, showing a freak off that she said she was mortified about on a commercial flight. Just having it playing there for 5 hours. And what did you do when you got back that night? We had a freak off and he was basically like, she sounded so helpless, where she's like, how do you get out of this situation? How do you get out of this? Mm-hmm. She sounded so helpless. And I think you can understand why she did it, but the reason she loses sympathy with the jury is the thing that I reported made the viewing room gasp, which is she had asked for $30 million from Diddy, meaning she set a price as to what she felt justice was for her. And she set that price of $30 million. She asked for it first. She said, I'll sell you my book rights for $30 million. He said no. Then she sued him. And the day after she sued him for the same $30 million that she looked for in that book deal, he settled and gave her 20. And then she sued the Intercontinental and got another $10 million, meaning
So
she
got her justice.
She got her justice. And
she got her justice.
And she wasn't crying for justice. Like, and when I was watching her, I was like, I think she would be totally fine if he spent the rest of his days in prison, and she would be totally fine going out for dinner with him next week. She seems as if she's gotten a ton of therapy, and she's just like, it's her past and it's over. And she has some great memories from him and some horrifying memories of him, and that she's got her 2 kids, she's got her husband, she's moved on from her life, and she's like, and it's like a bittersweet memory. And so it's a bittersweet memory, and she got her money. So you're not looking to get her justice, right? You're not looking, the jury isn't going out there saying, oh, we got to do this for Cassie, because Cassie doesn't care about getting justice against him. So now, with all the factors you mentioned, you don't have a charged up jury looking to go after this guy. And there's enough basis that you can say, okay, maybe he did force her once or twice, but I'm not throwing him in prison the rest of his life. This isn't really sex trafficking anyway, because trafficking is supposed to be when someone's kidnapping someone and making money off of it, not feeding their own fetishes. This doesn't feel like trafficking.
Yes, and I think one thing with the trafficking that I think hurt the case is that so Diddy's legal team, essentially their defense was, we did all this shit. Right. They didn't deny really anything. They were like, we beat her, we paid the prostitute, we did it all, right? It just wasn't, this didn't rise to the level of sex trafficking. This didn't rise to the level, because he essentially said, I beat her. This is a domestic violence case, not a sex trafficking case. But I think this is where lawyering comes in, and lawyering makes a difference. Because, as a prosecutor, I've dealt with many sex trafficking cases, many of these cases. And the majority of cases involving sex traffickers are domestic violence cases, because domestic violence is how the sex traffickers use. Now, the way it generally works, so everybody doesn't understand, there's usually some young woman, and she meets this guy, and she believes the guy is her boyfriend. And the boyfriend, oh, we need to make some money. Hey, have sex right here for this guy, and we'll make some money together. And then that guy starts pimping her out, right? And then when she says she doesn't want to do it, he starts beating her. She calls the cops. It's domestic violence. And then eventually that person gets charged with sex trafficking. And the way they forced her into sex trafficking was through domestic violence. This is the majority of sex trafficking cases happens this way. Right. So this was not. So when people say, well, this is a domestic violence case, not a sex trafficking case, well, that's just, it doesn't make sense to the reality of the situation that the majority of sex trafficking cases are domestic violence cases too. Right. Domestic violence is the means in which you sex traffic. Right. But I think the prosecutors were unable to make that argument, or what were they didn't have the wherewithal to make that argument that this is the means of force. Is through, it's not two different things. And I think that hurt them, because I think they backed up and said, hey, this is just domestic violence, not sex trafficking, not understanding that they are one and the same. And if you really think about the charges that he was found guilty of, the transportation for prostitution and sex trafficking are almost identical. The only difference is the force, fraud, or coercion. Sex trafficking is essentially transportation for prostitution across state lines with force, fraud, or coercion. That's essentially what sex trafficking is. Mm-hmm. You did have the force, fraud, or coercion. You had it on. You had the video of it. So that is one of the things with the Cassie thing that gives me a little pause, is because they found that he did transport her to have commercial sex acts. They just didn't believe he forced her into those commercial sex acts. Essentially, the force, fraud, or coercion wasn't there. So right. I don't know how do you resolve that? Where the jury says, yeah, she was trafficked essentially, but it wasn't by force, fraud, or coercion.
I really think that this is less an analysis of law by the jury
Of course, I'm just asking you.
It's more. I think it's an emotion. I think you and I, as attorneys, were like, okay, so this is what the jury is thinking, and I don't know. It's not really what the jury is thinking. It's the legal justification that we're doing after the fact, based on the verdict. So we obviously, you and I have no idea what they were actually thinking, and it could be that there just were a couple of very loud pre-Diddy voices in there, and they're like, well, we can't get them out of this part of it. So they, so that's basically because it was just obvious. There's so much evidence that, he was setting up and paying for these people to cross state lines, and there's no refutation. There's really almost no defense to it. The defense they put up there is, well, you pay people for their time. So it's like, that's prostitution.
That's
So that was their defense. From opening arguments, they never even, that was how they said it in opening argument, in opening statements. That's how defense painted it. And with respect to these last two charges, well, you got to pay people people get compensated for their time based on their skills and experience. Okay, yeah, some hookers make a lot more than others. That's what's going to happen. That doesn't mean that you're not guilty. So I think the defense is thrilled with this, and I think. But as far as what's going through the jury's mind, I think the most likely thing is they at a certain point they became free Diddy, and I think strategically Maureen Comey and her team really underestimated the potential damage that came out of bringing Jane up there.
I think Jane was the problem. Yeah.
There was one other thing, and the judge even referred to it when the defense was upset with one of Cassie's friends was also potentially very damaging to her case. And that was the friend that we heard in opening statements about a woman that he dangled over the edge of a balcony.
Oh, I thought that was horrible too. Yeah.
And this woman, her name was Brianna Bonalong. They call her Bono.
Uh-huh.
Her story on this changed so many times. Where one time she's on where it was, whether it was in a hotel or at Cassie's house. That changed. It changed. Her story changed. Whether he's dangling over the edge, what position she's in, how much drugs she had taken, didn't take. Whether she's facing him or facing away from him. How do you possibly confuse whether you're if you see someone running at you, lunging at you to hold you over the edge of a balcony, versus all of a sudden you get hoisted up and you're being thrown up? You don't forget that.
No.
You remember what you're seeing. That's what you're seeing. That's what you remember. And then she said, here is pictures of the big, massive welt I have on my leg because he threw me onto the balcony furniture there, and I hurt my leg, and I had to go get a doctor, and hurt my head and my leg, and here's pictures taken later that day. And that day was, I think, September 25th, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That day, he's in New York.
Yeah.
He's in New York performing.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
So it's like, oh my God. Like, what happened here? And it wasn't that just she was attacked. They were like, the way the defense portrayed it very effectively was, hey, let's face it. These people are all in here for a payday. Cassie's in here for a payday. This Kerry Morgan sued him. Also, another friend sued him for payday. Bona's in it for a payday, and they sat together and they put together their stories and they're trying to piece it together. You say this, and when you have one of her friends being so thoroughly excoriated that when the defense asked to have her entire testimony stricken, Judge Subramanian, who I think did a pretty good job here, he said, I'm not going to strike it. And from the defense's perspective, wouldn't you be happy to have that Perry Mason moment up there?
Yeah, of course.
And that's how he referred to it. He referred to it as a Perry Mason moment that they had. So it basically tainted Cassie's testimony because her friend looked like such a big, fat, stinking liar. And this is supposed to be substantiating her story that you start asking yourself, maybe she put together her story in certain degrees. Maybe she enhanced and embellished. And I think that I think if they had ended the trial right after Cassie, I think they're much more likely they get a conviction right there on everything, on the RICO, on takeout. Just put her up there, put up Deontay Nash, who was a friend of hers, who was one of her besties, and he was a phenomenally strong witness for the state, and maybe Flora is the first witness who came up there, and a couple of the prostitutes, the entertainers, and boom, get this thing done in 3 weeks. They could have had this whole trial done, and I think they would have gotten him on RICO and trafficking, Cassie.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Jane was the problem, because after Jane's, like, even your coverage changed after Jane. After that pyramid, your coverage changed.
Did it?
Well,
not consciously.
No. What I'm talking about is that you were more like, hey, this is happening. And then after that moment, you were kind of like, it was kind of like, hey, I still believe this is happening, but I'm now a little less sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like that shook you, where you were still saying, I believe this happened, but now I'm a little less sure. And I thought, and coming from you, who is an attorney who's watching this, I'm like, well, that's starting to sound like reasonable doubt to me. It's starting to sound a little bit more like reasonable doubt, especially the Paramason one. Like, this is starting to sound like reasonable doubt, because people fail to realize the prosecutor, by putting up, in this case, I think it was too much. They put up too many witnesses, enough witnesses to destroy their own case. And I think Jane was the witness to destroy their own case. And unfortunately, it took Cassie down with them. But Cassie got her justice. And I still think Cassie still,
And I want to be clear about this, because I saw comments about Cassie getting her justice. I'm not saying that this makes it okay the way he treated Cassie.
No, of course not.
And neither is Nate. We don't think that that's at all okay. It's not excusing it. It doesn't mean like, oh, well, it's no big deal because she got her payday. No, the point is, does a jury now want to go out and convict and find reasons to convict this guy? Or are they out there seeking justice? Like, we need to get justice for this victim. And if she doesn't play as a victim, which by the time she was done, she played like much less of a victim, because I'm just telling you the vibe in the room. As soon as she said she got 20 million, the entire room I was in was like, whoa. And then when she said she got another 10 million, everyone was like, oh my God, like she got her full 30 million. I'm not saying it makes it okay. I'm simply assessing that a jury is far less likely to go hunting for the blood of the defendant when they feel as if this victim has gotten some sense, some measure of justice, and isn't even asking the jury to convict. Seems very ambivalent about it. So you're sort of asking yourselves, where are we coming in here and saying that we know best about what justice is, when the actual victim herself doesn't seem to be seeking justice at this point any longer. So it's not to excuse it. It was monstrous and terrible, but that's just the reality, is how juries likely think. A lot of people think that way, and the jury is going to be comprised with some, if not all of them.
Yeah, the jurors are not lawyers. They're just regular people who are looking at these facts and trying to make sense of what they've heard. And I think when they laid everything out, it kind of was like, well, we have two women who, on one instance, they're saying they didn't want to do free calls, because it's kind of like somebody else made an analogy earlier. It's kind of like when you want to have relations with your partner, and they say no, and you sometimes you may push a little bit more, and they're like, no, please, I'm just too tired. I'm too tired. You weren't forcing yourself on them. You're trying to convince them. But then the next night they're into it, but you're not into it. And you're like no, and they're like yes. That type of thing. It was kind of like the jury may have seen it like this, where not every time she wanted to do it, but when she did, and then even times she asked to do it.
Yeah.
So is this really just a relationship thing, or is it sex trafficking?
Yep.
And I think they put it on and said this was a relationship thing, because in other sex trafficking cases, you're having, and I think that's another thing that people have to go over, is that in most sex trafficking cases, you're having the woman have sex with another guy, but not for your gratification, to get money from that person, right? I'm having the sex trafficking victim have sex with a third party, and that third party pays me the money. So that's what people conventionally see as sex trafficking. Here, this was Diddy saying, I'm having her have sex with, willingly, and most times, with a third party for my sexual gratification, and I'm actually paying them to do it.
Yeah.
They're not paying me. I'm paying both of them to do it, and that, I think, makes the dynamic a lot different. It's not traditional sex trafficking; it's a lifestyle choice. And I think the defense made a very good argument that, hey, this was his lifestyle. He wasn't getting paid to sex traffic her. He was paying. If anything, he was paying them for his own sexual gratification. So.
And here's the thing also, it only becomes trafficking because it's commercial sex.
Yes.
And meaning there's money being exchanged here. In a normal trafficking case, the money is the motivator. The money is
Correct.
everything. The reason we're doing this is to make money.
Yes.
That's what the money is. The exact opposite of this case.
The trafficker is
the defendant. The defendant himself would have been happiest if it was not commercial. If he didn't have to pay for it.
Yes.
So it's like an inverted type of thing.
An inverted thing.
If they would have said, wow, this woman is really pretty, I'll do this for free, he would have been happier.
Yeah.
So that's the exact opposite. Your typical defendant who was only happy to do it if it's commercial versus this defendant who would have been perfectly fine if not happier without it being commercial. And that's why that's what made it a very tricky dance. And that's because these elements were parsed together to try and say this is the crime. We see what happened here. Well, we can find this element, find that element, and throw a big hodgepodge together. And what are those elements, when we put it into our little chart here, what do these elements equal up to? Well, it technically equals up to trafficking, even though that's not the objective of trafficking, and it seems completely inverted from a normal trafficking case.
Yes. I think that was a brilliant analysis. And I think most people, when they talk about trafficking, think of it in that way. The trafficker is the one benefiting from it in terms of, and the prosecution tried to make it seem like, well, he was benefiting sexually, but not monetarily. And it's just another hard leap. I'm paying the traffickers, I'm paying the men, I'm paying the women, and I'm paying them to have sex for me so I can just watch them. It was tough, but I still will go to bat. The RICO charge in this case was legit, and they found him guilty of the predicates for the RICO, but they didn't find. But they believed all this was personal. But I want to ask you, because you were there most of the days, most if not all days. Didn't the company in some way? How was the company financially involved with the payments for the free calls? Weren't some of the payments going through the company?
Through Bad Boy Entertainment, yes.
So because that just so everybody understands, that generally alone gets you the RICO, right? The fact that you can show the company paid for this equipment for the freak offs. Now you're in the criminal. Now you're in that criminal enterprise, right? Because now the company is paying for these supplies. So that's the part that's the reason why I thought RICO was a short thing, is because if the company's financially funding these sex acts, but I'm thinking they didn't think. Again, this is just my speculation. I'm thinking the jury just thought this wasn't for the benefit of the company or the organization. It was just benefiting himself, and it makes sense because he's not paying. So
I want to ask you about
money from this. He's not making any money from this.
He's losing money
from
this.
He
lost millions. He wasted millions of dollars on this predilection. My question for you is this: when you have an actual company. This is something that bothered me when they brought RICO charges against Trump also. Yeah. Because, it's not as if this company was put together to commit crimes.
Correct.
It's that there's basically, crimes that over the span of 15 years, there's an incident here. There's an incident there. There's an incident here and there. And I don't look at it as a criminal enterprise. I look at it that, like you would think of the mafia being a criminal, that they're associating for the purposes of engaging in crime. I look at it as an enterprise that's actually legitimate, good faith, and very profitable, which has participated in some crimes. But that's not it's not an enterprise that's meant for that. I assume, based on what you're saying, that still would be a RICO violation.
Well, so there are some misconceptions about RICO that people need to understand. Number one, you don't need a company at all.
Right.
If me, you, and a third party come to an agreement to do something, there's no formal paperwork or anything. Hey, we're going to do this, and we start working. That could be the enterprise. The enterprise can just be our agreement. It's conspiracy. It's right, the agreement. And as soon as we put a structure to our little organization with the three people, in other words, I'll say, Joe, you'll lead it. You'll tell us what to do. That organizational structure then gives us the RICO. Now, I think the government in this particular case failed to dumb down the RICO in terms of, hey, you don't need it to be Bad Boy. You don't need it. You just need the CFO, this person, the security guards, all being paid, right? It doesn't have to be Bad Boy. That's the enterprise itself. It's just like a street gang. There's no formal paperwork. It's just like all these other RICO. There's a lot. RICO's used in a lot of other places where there's no organization, but the organization is kind of assumed because here's the person running it. Here's the person paying for it. But in this case, I think the fatal flaw to the RICO was that in all other RICO cases, right? In all the RICO cases, the person who's benefiting financially is generally the defendant. In this case, he wasn't benefiting financially. He was the one he was the one paying for everything, right? Like in the mob RICO case, right? They're doing all this stuff so they can get more money, right? It's the bottom line. In this case, he's doing all this stuff to pay more money, to do it again. So it's kind of, so like you're saying,
it's the same flaw. It's the same flaw as the trafficking.
Exactly. Everything is in reverse. Yeah, I'm doing all this, but the only one that it's not, that is actually correct, was the transportation for prostitution across state lines. That's the one where, I'm paying them to do. So that's just plain. But in all the other things, it was reversed. He was losing money doing this. So it's kind of like, what's the benefit to this guy who trying to get convicted for these charges when he's the one that's being asked out? No, I'm paying this girl $10,000 a month. I'm paying this girl millions of dollars. I'm paying this guy $1,000, flying him out everywhere at my own expense, and they're not, not getting any type of benefit. So it's, and I think that is, again, great lawyering on the defense, is explaining that, hey, this was personal choices. He wasn't benefiting from this like these were personal choices from a personal guy who wanted to do this in a personal man. This wasn't RICO. This was him saying, I want to have sex with prostitutes and I'm going to pay them, right? And I think that is beautifully what they were able to do. And I think we also need to note Brian Steele is 2 for 2 against the government on RICO.
Yeah,
the Diddy trial he's got. But
you missed my Brian Steele story.
Yeah, but the Young Thug one, though. The only problem with the Young Thug one, Young Thug pled guilty to the top count. The judge just let him go, but he pled guilty to the top count. But he's 2 for 2 at RICO. So if you got a RICO case, I want Brian Steele. I'm handing.
Sorry, you missed my story. I bumped into Brian Steele at the courthouse in the bathroom.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I actually, I told him dude, you're a legend. And he's like, thanks. I was like, what happened with Judge Glanville there? That was very impressive.
That was great.
The way you handled that was very, very impressive. And we started talking, and he asked me how I thought the case was going, and I actually gave him some tips for closing.
Oh, wow.
So I said, this is what I would expect the defense to put in closing. Not that I was looking for him to be acquitted. I really would have been fine either way with this outcome or him being convicted. But I respect Brian Steele, and as an attorney who's sitting outside, I'm like, this is what I'm seeing. I think you guys really want to hit hard on the 30 million. I think you want to, you really want to nail that. And the reason I'm telling you that is because the reaction from the viewing room was significant when that testimony came out about her being paid. And I think so. And I gave him a couple of other things that I was recommending that he should do. And that was a text exchange. I actually
that's great.
So I'm hoping that I can get him on here. I asked him if I get him on. He's like, so I was like, maybe after the trial.
Yeah,
after the trial.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna see about getting him on and bring him in here, because you're right, 2 for 2 in RICO. Very impressive.
That's hard. It's hard to do. That's hard.
No one. If you're a criminal defense, let's understand this. Think about this for a second. The federal government wins 90%. Like 90 to 95% of their cases. So you beat them in 2 internationally known cases on RICO, when the whole purpose to bring RICO, Alan Dershowitz said, is you bring RICO because you want to get convictions.
Yes, correct.
Because RICO
it's so broad.
It's so broad, and it enables you to flesh out your story. There's so many advantages to the state by having RICO that. So for him to win against the federal government in 2 RICO cases, there's probably not that many people who can make that claim. You can probably count like on one hand how many people can say I won 2 RICO defense trials. So yeah.
Oh my God.
Friend. I'm sorry. You had something. I'm gonna start landing my plane here because.
Go. No, I'll get out of here. But the last thing I want to say, your coverage was phenomenal. I think at the end of the day with this case, what it does show is that the verdict is a total win for Mr. Puff. Yeah, Uncivil's right. The verdict no matter what anybody tells you, the verdict is definitely. If I
And the
was Puffy, I'd be
speculation, by the
happy.
way, the speculation is he might get out for time served.
Yeah, he's already been in for a year and a half.
Yeah, he might get
He's
out.
already-
He might get out for time served.
All of this counts. A lot of people. Matter of fact, I think he should get bail right now.
Oh, I think you should give him a high number.
Yeah,
I think at least $1 million. And if he said 10 million, I mean it's Diddy. He has 10 million.
Yeah, he has 10 million. Yeah.
So maybe it would be maybe it would go as high as 10 million. I don't think it will be, but maybe it would go as high as 10 million. But I think that he definitely should get bail because it's like if you make the price tag high enough, he'd have to be an idiot to flee at this point.
Matter of fact,
and no one thinks he's an idiot. Whatever you think of Diddy, no one thinks the man is stupid.
But I would even say this. I would if I'm the state, I would probably go ask for a low number and hope he messes up with bail, because if he messes up with bail, you can get him for a better. He'll get more time than if he gets sentenced for the Mann Act, right? I would pray he jump bail, because jumping bail will probably get him more time. With the sentence though for the Mann Act violations, I think it's a maximum of 10, but sentencing guidelines are about 15, 21 months for each count. So it's about 21 months. So we're talking about 2 years maybe. And then he's already been in the year, because don't forget all this bail stuff counts that he's been in for a year and a half now. It's been a year that he's been in. So if he's been in for if he's been in for a year, that year's taken off. And then he's a first-time offender. They're going to argue violence and all that stuff, but he's found not guilty on those, so you really can't use that. So so I'm assuming if he gets the bail, I would give him bail. I don't know, but the number wouldn't really $1 million. It would matter. And the second is that the sentencing, if matter of fact, if he doesn't walk or get maybe a couple of months in prison, then that would be that's crazy. He would probably, you're looking at maybe 6 months to a year, if that. And appealing
in Club Fed also.
It's not in Club Fed.
This is not gonna be Oz, where he's at. This is he's gonna be a Club Fed for up to a year or so.
Yeah. It's gonna be great. So don't hate Nate, love him. No, you know what? This trial, I thought, again, if you look at there are Bruce Rivers and all the big legal criminal attorneys here on YouTube, all believed Diddy was getting convicted on everything, and they brought up R. Kelly, and they brought up all the other big RICO cases. They thought Diddy was going to be convicted on everything. And because they know how RICO is so damaging. But I think the reason why what they missed is that textbook legal, if there were robots who are in that jury room who just had to just look at the law and look at this, Diddy would be convicted. These aren't robots. These are people with experiences. And I think when they looked at it, it became, can I really believe these people? But textbook, RICO is here. And because they literally found him guilty on the two underlying predicate felonies that they needed to find for RICO. So I think
assuming they're within 10 years of each other.
Well, the two predicates, the two they found him guilty were
within 10 years. They have to both be within 10 years of each other, according to jury instructions. And I'm not sure when Jane's. I have to go look up.
Not Jane. I'm talking about.
I'm not sure when Cassie's was. Whether it was more. It might have been 14. It might have been 13 years ago.
Well, no, because the transportation for Cassie across state lines.
Look it up.
That was 2016. You got 2017 because she hadn't left it within 10 years. So the two transportation for prostitution charges were within the last 10 years.
I need to go look up. Number 3 and 5.
I think those were within the last 10 years.
Now I'm very curious.
Because I think Cassie for sure was in the last 10 years because she left. Did she leave more than 10 years ago or less than 10 years?
No, she left less than 10 years ago, but you need to get when is the interstate action.
Yeah, and I'm assuming they were traveling around too.
No, I'm saying if that incident with the interstate transportation happened in 2012.
No, it doesn't matter. It's not good for this.
You have to have two within for RICO
within a 10-year period.
Two within 10 years of each other, according to the jury. I'm just reading what the jury charges said on RICO. Mm-hmm. So it could be that one of them. I need to check out when it was. Let's assume that we know that Jane's was within the last year. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 2023, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if if the interstate transportation for Cassie was an incident that happened in 2012, you cannot now combine those two.
No.
For the purposes, because they're more than
it's
10
too
years
far apart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, from my understanding, RICO is in the past 10 years, the 2 predicates have to have occurred within the past 10 years. So they indicted him in 2022. I mean 2023 or 2024. When did they indict Diddy?
They indicted him in 24.
So then you go all the way back 10 years before that. So everything that happened within that 10-year time period, those are RICO predicates.
Will he file an appeal? He could.
For what, though? For the transportation, I don't think you have any appealable issue with transportation prostitution.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's 2 predicates within the last 10 years. Yeah. 2 predicates with the uncivil checked it out. And I also think the jury instructions didn't help the prosecution at all, because it made it seem like you needed to find 2, like you needed to find 1 kidnapping and 1 drug distribution, or 2 separate crimes to be eligible for RICO, where you could find 2 of the same crimes and be RICO eligible. So I think that also confused the jury a little bit. But you
could have got him on drug twice, easy.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. The drug trafficking alone, the drug distribution alone. But at the end of the day, I think I don't blame the jury. I think the state bungled this case by bringing Jane. And I think Jane made it less likely that he get, because again, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, and there was a lot of reasonable doubt with Jane, and I think Jane made more reasonable doubt with Cassie, and I think that's why you don't have any that's why they've lost this case. But those are my thoughts. But you said you're going to land the plane. Let me let you land this.
Thank you for joining me, my friend. You did a great job covering this. So.
But I want to ask you one question before I leave. If you were a juror, what would have been your verdict on all these counts? The 5 counts. What would your verdict have been? Because you watched it. You watched it. You were a juror.
Yeah. I probably would have hit him on 1 and 2. On the RICO charge and the Cassie. I probably would have hit him on those 2. In fact, I actually have a video that I'm producing, which basically explains the state's theory about that violent incident, about how we are watching sex trafficking.
Yeah,
we're watching Diddy sex traffic him. We don't know it without law, and I'll ask you guys to make sure you check out this video without knowing the context of factually what's happening there, and without knowing the way the law operates. You don't realize you're watching it, but you are watching a technical violation of 18 U.S.C. 1591. So, I think that I probably would have found him guilty on the RICO and on the other one. So I think that while I don't like it, I think that technically the definition of the law, I think he is guilty. But I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with this verdict. I'm not angry about this verdict. I'm like, all right. I think it's funny. I think it's fun. I'm amused to laugh at Maureen Comey, because I think these charges were kind of stupid. Yeah, I don't like I think it's a perversion of justice. It's not justice. It's a perversion of justice when you take statutes and you flip them on their head because you think you have elements. I think that's a way of going after the man. And even though this man might be a terrible human being, I think he is a terrible human being. I think the guy's monstrous. But that doesn't, if we allow prosecutors to reinvent statutes so that they can go after someone that they decide to go after, that is a far more dangerous threat to society at large than any one person can be. So
that's interesting, because I thought because you're exactly where I was at for the RICO. I would have found him guilty, but that was because it was just everything was there. Sex trafficking, Cassie, I'm not gonna pretend I could have been swayed either way. The Jane, I just dismissed Jane. I would have been a hard not guilty for Jane. I know that's going to offend people, but I would have been a hard not guilty for Jane. And the other 2, the prostitution thing, I would have done the transportation prostitution. I thought there was no way I could have found him not guilty. Right? It was like that was there. So yeah, so me and you are pretty much exactly the same. And people are equating this to Diddy, and not to Diddy, to OJ. I don't think so. I just think
not at all.
I think at the end of the day, in this case, the prosecution argued a bad case. That's just what happened. that's just essentially what happened. And hopefully they'll figure it out, but they argued a bad case.
I need you for 30 seconds after. I have a question about so don't go anywhere, but I'm gonna land my plane here. I thank you all for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed the coverage. And if you just found me recently, I hope you'll check out other coverage that I provide. I do podcasts. I also cover trials from time to time as they seem significant and relevant. So I hope that you'll stick around here. I thank each and every one of you for joining me. And yeah, I'll see you all tonight. I expect to be streaming tonight. And until then, I thank you and Godspeed. Oh, where should people find you? Tell them fast. Tell them.
Oh, Nate the Lawyer. Just Google Nate the Lawyer. Google Nate the Lawyer.
Nate the Lawyer.
Nate the
All
Lawyer.
Right. Take care, everyone. God